There's something quietly treacherous about snow. It softens the world, muffles the noises you rely on to feel safe, and then, almost without warning, it can hide the one thing that would have made sense of the night. Tonight I want to tell you 3 true stories, 3 snowy nights when ordinary people found themselves face to face with something they couldn't explain. Each one begins with that same deceptive hush and ends with a hole where reason ought to be. If you like unsettling true stories, stick around. There's a second tale that gets stranger, not less. I remember the night I thought a walk would clear my head. The sky had been spitting snow since late afternoon. Not a blizzard, just a steady drift that turned the hedges into smooth white shapes and made every familiar path look new. The kind of quiet where your own breath sounds loud. I pulled my hood up and set off down the track behind my house, the sort of place I knew so well I could walk it blind. There was a thin layer of fresh snow, a few centimeters underfoot, and my own footprints marked my route like a whispered announcement. Someone had been here. The first odd thing was a voice, small, bright and oddly cheerful, that said hello. It wasn't the shout of a passerby. It wasn't the crackle of a speaker or the muffled sound of a TV. It sounded exactly like a child standing just behind me. But there was no child. The hair on my neck prickled in that way you only notice when you're suddenly very aware of your place in the dark. I turned slowly, expecting to see a gap in the hedge, a person huddled in a coat, or a dog with an owner calling it back. Instead, I saw a tree, an old beech that rose from the bank, branches like ribs. And there, impossibly high up, something was perched on one of the thicker limbs. A little boy. He could have been 9, maybe 10. He was wearing what looked like a light jumper, no heavy winter coat. His hair was matted with snow. He was sitting on a branch about 6 meters, roughly 20 feet, off the ground. When I saw him, my first stupid thought was that someone had put a mannequin there as a prank. Then he turned his head and smiled at me. The smile was wrong. It stayed in place like a photograph, while his eyes tracked me. Below the tree, the snow was untouched. There were no marks around the trunk, not a single footprint leading towards it. I remember thinking that one detail should have explained the whole thing. If there were footprints, maybe there would be an adult nearby, a parent, someone who could say it made sense. But there were none. The snow under the branches was perfect and white, as if no one had come near since the snow started. He said hi again, and climbed. Not the tentative scramble you see in children, but an impossibly sure motion. He scampered higher, hands and feet finding the bark the way a cat finds a wall. He reached a huge limb, rose to his feet, and for a heartbeat I watched the logic of the world unwind. He stepped off the branch. The sound of him hitting the snow was dull, like a thud wrapped in cotton. He landed feet first, from at least 6 meters, and did not break. He staggered as if surprised, then ran. He ran in that same impossible way, too quick for a child who had just fallen that far. I yelled reflexively. I chased. I have no idea why I did. Maybe it was shock, or guilt, or the stubbornness that comes of thinking you should have done something sooner. I pushed through the undergrowth, my boots forcing tracks into the snow. There was laughter, pealing and childish, echoing between trees, like someone had taken a recording and played it back at small volume. Then hands closed around the back of my neck. It was sudden and precise, like a clamp. Fingernails dragged, not deep but enough to slice the skin. The cold hit my face and a hot rush of blood trickled down, and for a second the world narrowed to that burning line and the air filling with the sound of my own breathing. When I managed to wrench free, he was gone. I found my way back to the path in a daze. By the time the ambulance arrived, I was blinking at the orange glow of the lights and the crunch of boots on the verge. Paramedics checked the cut at my neck and wrapped it, their faces kind, but puzzled. The police came too, polite in the way of people doing their job. They searched the surrounding woods, torches sweeping the trees, radios crackling. What they found, as they told me, was my footprints. That was it. My prints leading in and out. Nothing else. No small footprints near the tree, no sign of anyone leaving. I told them what I'd seen, the boy in the tree, the fall, the scratch, and they took my statement the same way they took many statements, with notebooks and a professional skepticism that was not hostility so much as the slow discipline of habit. I went back the next morning. The snow had crusted and settled. Daylight made everything look colder and larger. There were 2 scuffed patches under the branch, where something heavy had landed, but still no small prints. I scoured the area, calling stupidly, like a parent who has mislaid a child. Nothing answered me. People asked if I'd been drinking. They asked if I could have imagined it. I asked myself the same. There are nights I replay it frame by frame, the way the boy used his hands, the way he smiled when he stepped off the branch, the sound of the snow packing under him. The cut on my neck faded into a thin line and then into a memory. But the bigger thing that never left me was how clean everything had looked the next day. Clean in the way that made any explanation slippery. Snow made the night kinder and more dangerous all at once. It muffled what I needed to hear to know what had happened. Every time there's a snowfall now, there is a small, irrational urge to check the trees. They told me later that the police had found nothing more to go on. The report noted only my footprints. For a while, I slept with a hoodie on in August, half expecting small hands against my throat. Eventually, the physical signs faded. The strange part was not that it happened, but that no trace of anyone else remained. And that absence was the thing that became, for me, the most violent proof that something was wrong. Snow can erase what would otherwise make sense. It can make the world into a stage where props appear and disappear without a cue. And when it erases, sometimes it erases the only thing that could have been the answer. If that unsettles you, wait until the next one. This one has no footprints either, but it involves something much larger than a boy in a tree. I was a student then, back from term for the holidays, and not thinking much of the weather beyond wondering if the university would cancel my seminar. The forecast had been worse than expected. By evening, the roads were draped in a heavy, wet snow that stuck to everything. I decided to walk to my friend Ryan's house. It was only about 1 mile to 1.5 miles, roughly 1.5 to 2.5 kilometers. A bracing walk, I told myself, and better than sitting in watching the news. Carrying a backpack and bundled up, I set off along the road that cut through the outskirts of town. I could see a set of headlights coming down the road. They were broad and slow, the kind you get from a snowplow. The vehicle hummed through the fall, like some steady, inevitable creature, its yellow lights cutting twin slices through the dusk. It veered slightly, as if avoiding a patch of glare, and then, to my eyes, it dipped into the trees on the verge, and there was a muffled impact. The headlights blinked out. I ran towards the place where the plough had been. Drivers, at that time of night in that weather, do not disappear. If someone had gone off the road, surely they would be visible. The plough lay embedded against a tree, the engine still ticking and warm. The lights were on, the cab was open, no one was inside. I checked around the tires, the tracks, the snow packed underneath. Nothing, no footprints leading away. The plough's door hung open like a mouth, and an empty thermos rolled across the snow as if it had always been alone. I peered in the cab, half expecting a driver to slump, groaning and frostbitten, but it was empty. The radio was tuned to no station. The seatbelt sat undisturbed. It was as if the driver had simply dissolved out of the vehicle while it crawled through the trees. That's the bit that makes you want to be brave and investigate. My mind supplied all sorts of reasonable ideas in a rush. The driver might have been dragged by the windshield when the vehicle struck. They might have walked away to fetch a phone. They might be injured just out of sight. But there were no marks in the snow, no step marks heading into the trees, no sign of someone trying to crawl away from the scene. It was absurd. The thing that made me cut and run was a voice. It wasn't an indistinct noise. It was a man calling for help. At first it sounded very distant, like someone from far off an open road, muffled by snow. I called back and then heard the voice again. much closer, as if somebody had stepped up behind me and started shouting directly in my ear. My gut told me to get to Ryan's house. I did not stay. I ran, the details of the plough and the empty cab forcing themselves into a corner of my head I could not shake. Ryan and his dad came out with torches when I burst in, breathless and pale. We went back to the place with a phone call to the police. Officers came, polite, methodical. We pointed out the plough. They looked at the site, probed for tire marks in the slush, walked and walked in a grid. They found the plough, yes. They found its serial number. They took photos. And then they told us, gently, that in their sweep they could find no clear evidence someone had left the cab on foot, no footprints in the direction we thought the voice had come from, no sign of a body, no discarded clothing. Their report, which came later, recorded us as witnesses to a crashed plough with an empty cab and no known occupant. What haunts me about that night is not only the impossibility of the empty vehicle, but how audibly present the voice was. It had a tone, pleading, announcing, that stuck in my head. For days afterwards, I would find myself half listening on quiet streets, expecting to hear it again. Sometimes, in the dark, a shout would sound, as if it were just a little too close to me. People solve mysteries in different ways. Some nights I tried to give it a conventional explanation. A driver who had walked off to get help and been rescued elsewhere. A prank not thought through. But then you replay the image of a cab with its door open and no footprints, and you cannot fit a neat ending onto it. The police were thorough in their own way, but like the paramedics earlier, they could only record what was there. The truth is that to me the night felt like a gap opened in the world, and nothing slid into it to fit. There is a particular cruelty to being handed something both so plainly physical, an actual plough, a cold engine, headlights, and then being told that the human element, the person who ought to explain it all, is missing. It's as if the snow took only what we needed to make sense of the scene, and left the rest to hang undecided in the air. The second time, I felt that small animal prickling of fear that tells you to move. I knew enough to run. That voice could have been a cry from someone trapped and cold. It could also have been the lure that keeps you in place for one extra heart-stopping second. I went to Ryan's house, and I never learned if anyone else saw the man who had been calling. The plough was recovered before morning, but the police could not say who, if anyone, had been behind the wheel. The logbook showed the plough as assigned and in service. The place where it lay, in my memory, sat like a punctuation mark, bright, impossible, and unresolved. If you're thinking this is a coincidence, the last story is not kind to coincidences. It's the one that arrived like a hunting thing, deliberate, persistent, and very close to home. My friend Sebastian, was 17 when it happened. He was that kind of teenager who ran for the school team, long legs, long lungs. He'd been coming home on the last train. It was a blizzard that night, the sort that scrubbed shapes from the horizon. The timetable had been cut. This was the last service. Charles and James were with him for company on the carriage, the three of them huddled against the cold and sleep-deprived laughter. Outside, the snow was a whiteout, and the platform lights smeared like watercolor. They got off at a small rural station. Seaby's walk home cut through a narrow lane and then a thin line of fields and trees, the sort of route you take without thinking because you've done it 100 times. He set off ahead of his mates, telling himself to keep a brisk pace. Halfway along the lane, his throat raw from the cold, he noticed a figure standing under the bare branches of a hedge. The man wore only a t-shirt and shorts. In that weather, with temperatures probably well below freezing, he should have been wrapped in layers. He should have been in hospital, or at least wrapped up in a coat. But there he was, smiling. It wasn't a small child this time. It was a grown man, gaunt, his skin described by Sebi later as grey-blue, in a way that made the hairs on his arms stand up when he told the story. He had that same wrong smile, not inviting, not friendly, but calm in a way that made Seaby's chest tighten. At first Seaby thought he was some mad prankster, the kind who liked shocking people on the edge of towns. He asked if the man was all right. The man's reply was not a phrase, but a charge. He moved as if the ground had been prepared for him, as if he had been waiting for someone to run so he could chase. He ran. The chase was not cinematic. It was ragged and real. Snow slapped their faces, lungs burned, and Sebi's legs found the rhythm of panic. He didn't know why the man wanted him, only that he did. Sebi got away, finally, stumbling into a lit porch where his mum was waiting, breathless and shaking. The next night the man came to the house. He stood at Sebi's bedroom window. His face was inches from the glass, the features oddly soft and yet hunted by that wrong color. Sebi's father caught a glimpse of him before he ran out in his slippers, chasing into the dark. The woods were treacherous. The police were called, but they told the father the same thing the past officers had said to others. They couldn't safely pursue into the woods at night during a blizzard. They would form a search by day, they said, but by morning the snow had erased the signs. What is most chilling in this account is not merely the pursuit, but the persistence. The man did not present as a one-off. He followed, appeared at the house, and then vanished into the night as if the snow had swallowed him whole. Sebi carried the panic with him for years. He still wakes sometimes, certain he hears something at the window. He moves his curtains at night. He feels safer with the light on. The father still talks about the way the man's face looked when he was framed in the window. Not furious, not sad, but small and straining with a kind of expectation. It's the sense that the man believed he deserved to be there. The common thread in all these nights is not simply oddity, it's absence. The trees, the verge, the cab, the window, all things that should show evidence of human presence, and then do not. Footprints erased, doors left ajar, calls heard, and then inexplicably closer. Police reports full of facts but not answers. Paramedics who treat the body while their faces quietly ask whether the injury is the result of a fall, an accident, or something else. Friends who believe you, but also want you to move on. The real terror is how the snow does not merely hide. It cleanses in such a way that even the most simple physical clue can be gone the next day. After the boy in the tree, I stopped taking solitary walks at night. When I had to, for work or for groceries, I kept to lit streets and to routes where I could see other people. But fear doesn't always obey rules. It nests in the small places. The sudden flinch when a branch taps the window, the way you look over your shoulder on the other side of the road. There are nights I hear a laugh in my memory, and it is the exact same laugh as that boy in the tree. There are times when, passing a service vehicle at dusk, I look in the cab to make sure someone is driving. Ryan still asks himself, sometimes, whether he made the right call, urging me away from the plough. He still wonders whether someone went to help, and then vanished. And Sebi, years on, keeps the curtains pulled and tells us he sleeps with his bedroom light on when storms are forecast. You'd think familiarity would blunt the edge of such memories. Instead, they become more efficient, living in the way you now avoid one small path, or the way your hand freezes on a doorknob. There are explanations you can stack up like stones: hypothermia, hallucination, pranksters, misperception. Each of them covers part of a night, but none of them closes the whole thing. The more I talk to other people who have had their own tiny, cracked encounters with the uncanny, a vanishing set of footprints, a voice that had to come from somewhere but which suddenly was right behind them, the more convinced I am that there is a particular vulnerability to snowy nights. Snow creates a blankness that can make the impossible look almost plausible. It allows absence to feel like an answer. I don't know whether any of these three events share a single cause. I can only relate what was seen and heard. I can only tell you what the nights felt like from inside them. I will say this, though. When the world is softened by snow, your senses sharpen in the oddest ways. You notice the smallest sounds. You notice the way lights sit on the road. You notice the way a footprint falls into a pattern and then suddenly drops out of it. You develop an awareness of what a human presence looks like, and once that map is broken, you are left with an acute sense of absence. When people asked why I kept telling the stories, I usually said it was to warn others to be cautious. But that's only partly true. I keep telling them because there is a comfort in being believed, in hearing someone else say, "I've heard that too." The discomfort comes from the knowledge that no neat explanation fits. The night does not care for tidy answers. So if you find yourself stepping out into falling snow, take an extra moment to look around. Notice where your footprints go. Notice if the path behind you still looks the same in the morning. All that sounds a little melodramatic, until it's not. For me, the horror is not a sudden, monstrous reveal. It is the slow, insistent feeling that something you trusted about your world has shifted. The snow takes away what anchors you, sound, sight, tracks, and leaves behind a question that keeps you awake. I'll leave you with one image that has never left me. A small child sitting high on a branch, not frightened by the heights, smiling like someone with a secret, and the way the snow around the tree looked as if it had been waiting for a visitor who never left any trace. It's an image that fits into the pattern of the other nights. Empty seats, open cabs, a man at a window, all connected by the hush of snowfall. If these stories struck a chord, if you want more nights like this, subscribe and you'll see the next one. For now, remember that quiet can hide more than peace. Sometimes it hides a question that never gets answered.